So hello and welcome to our Q&A session with Mike Sharpe, who is a professional genealogist and member of the Association of Genealogists and Researchers in Archives, or AGRA. So thank you for joining us today, Mike.
Thank you for the invitation. Looking forward to it.
Lovely. We asked our followers on Facebook to send in their queries, and Mike is going to help with 3 of those today. So let's start with Lisa Moore. So Lisa says, my grandmother Sarah Snaith was born on the 7th of June 1911. She was born and died in Wolverhampton, but I can't find a record of her death anywhere. I believe she died at home of a heart attack in 1974-ish. I believe her ashes are with my grandfather Cyril Snaith at Bushbury Crematorium in Wolverhampton. Okay, can you help Lisa find her grandmother's missing death record, Mike?
Well, it's unusual, really, not to be able to find a death, especially a recent one, because clearly registering a death is a statutory requirement, and if you don't do it, then it leaves relatives open to accusations of foul play. So generally the registration rate for deaths has always been higher than for births. So like Lisa, I had a look and I couldn't locate Sarah's death in the GRO indexes, and it doesn't sound as though she was known by any other name during her lifetime. So my inclination is that this event has been missed from the quarterly returns that the local registrars send back to the GRO, and so I'd advise Lisa maybe to apply to her local registrar, or to the local registrar in Wolverhampton, and ask them to search their indexes to see if they can find it. And most probably that would have to wait until after the lockdown, because many of the local registration services are restricted at the moment. As regarding, as far as the cemetery is concerned, as she says, Bushbury is one of the main cemeteries for Wolverhampton area. And like most municipal cemeteries, there are indexes which list those who were buried there and give the grave locations. Unfortunately, in this case, for Bushbury, those indexes aren't available online. The Deceased Online website it's a very good website for cemetery registers, but it has the registers for neighbouring Sandwell, and also the main Birmingham cemeteries are on the National Burial Index on Find My Past, but unfortunately for Wolverhampton, they're not online. So she'd need to either consult the local authority in Wolverhampton and ask them to search the registers, or I believe that they're available on microfilm at Wolverhampton Archives. And again, that's something that would have to wait until after the lockdown, because as you may know, all of the local archives and libraries are also closed. So a couple of things there that Lisa could maybe look into once restrictions are lifted.
Excellent. So yes, so she needs to find out where it would have been registered and contact them. And I think that's something people might not realise, is that the registers that are held by the GRO are copies of locally held ones that may have sometimes more complete or more accurate information. So
that's right. And every time a copy is made, there's scope for an error to creep in, or possibly, as may have happened in this case, for the entry to get left out altogether.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So next up, we've got a query from Ginny, who is looking for a birth record for Edwin Guest, and she's been looking for 20 years. So good luck with this one, Mike. But she knows he was born any time between 1834 and 1835 in Burnley, Birmingham, Blackburn, or Appleby, depending on the census return. So he obviously it's not been consistently reported on the censuses. He married in France to Esther Elizabeth Dallimore. Now, Ginny says he developed a form of shorthand and was a journalist for the People newspaper. So despite all this info, she can't positively identify him before 1867 or find his family. So his father is listed as Thomas Guest, Master Whitesmith on marriage certificate. She says she's got a few possibles, but no concrete evidence. So, Mike, did you manage to come up with any concrete evidence for Ginny, or any advice she can learn from her 20-year quest?
Yes, it's always a bit daunting to be given the problem that somebody says that they've been 20 years looking into. I think the father is a good place to start here. So Thomas Guest is a relatively unusual name, and we also have an occupation which is a master whitesmith, which is relatively unusual. So a whitesmith was someone who worked in white metals, which means such as lead, tin, or pewter, and it's found an occupation that would have been found around Birmingham and the Black Country in the metal working industries. So I found in the 1861 census, I managed to find a Thomas Guest, a whitesmith, who was living at 331 Summer Lane in Birmingham, with a wife Anne and 3 daughters, so Jane, Mary, and Eliza. And then 10 years before, in 1851, there's a Thomas Guest, aged 36, who's a whitesmith journeyman at more or less the same address in Summer Lane, Birmingham, this time with wife Anne and 5 children who were born between 1831 and 49. So that sort of spans the period that Edwin is thought to have been born, although there's no Edwin actually listed there. And Tom and Anne and the eldest child, William, were all born in Dudley, according to that census. Then if we go back 10 years earlier to 1841, I managed to find this family at an address in Blews Street, that's Blews Street in Birmingham, St George, and what looks like sons William and James, and William Ennis, who was aged 20, well, it's down as 25, but as you may know, in the 1841 census, the ages are rounded down, so it could mean that he was 25 to 29. And it's possible that because there are so many children, I thought it was possible that there was a child born after 1837, in which case we'd be able to use the new GRO indexes to look up the mother's maiden name. And so on the GRO website for Birmingham, there was a John Guest with mother's maiden name Ennis that was registered in Birmingham in 1838. And then I managed to find a Thomas Guest who married an Anne Ennis at King Swinford, which is one of the main Black Country parishes, and that was in June 1837. So that record was on Family Search. So there's the I wasn't able to identify Edwin, but I think there's the nucleus there of probably the family that he is from, that could very well be the right parents. That we have a very distinctive name there, Thomas Guest, and a very distinctive occupation, which is from the I think from Edwin's marriage certificate, and we've been able to tie those up with census entries. So on the other hand, there's also the information that Ginny gave us that on the 1911 census, Edwin says he was born in Blackburn, Lancashire. So why would he think that? I'm not quite sure. But nevertheless, for me, the fact that there is information on the marriage certificate that matches up with an identifiable person does suggest links or origins in the Midlands. And I wonder whether he was living with relatives, either living with relatives back in the Black Country, which is where Dudley area, where they came from, or given that he, appears to have been perhaps quite a bright child. Clearly, he became a journalist and possibly a schoolmaster. Maybe he won a scholarship somewhere, and his had been sent away to school at the time of those 2 censuses. So those were the feelings that I had about this case, even though I wasn't able to positively identify Edwin himself. So
sounds like you've helped, identify his mother, and maybe if they followed some of those siblings and seen followed those through, there may be other clues coming up. So
exactly, yes.
So people did sometimes use middle names, didn't they? And
that's right, yes.
Can't be sure.
Yes, so Edwin could well have been one of the middle names of the say several children that were in that family.
So possibly worth ordering some birth certificates.
I think so, yes.
So finally, we've got a query from Sam Pritchard. So his brick wall is not being able to find his grandfather. So he says, Sam says, his name is not on my mum's birth certificate and no one seems to know who he is. I've done an Ancestry DNA test and found a second cousin through that. Now their family is in the Leicestershire area and my grandmother's side is also in the Leicestershire area. But my second cousin hasn't come across any of the surnames that are in my grandmother's family tree, which makes me wonder if they are possibly connected through my grandfather's line. I'm guessing this will be a permanent brick wall, but I was wondering if there is anything I can try to do. So Mike, do you have any advice you can share with Sam?
Yes, indeed. I mean, DNA is absolutely fascinating development, and it's really changing the way that we do genealogy. And many people are breaking down brick walls as a result, and others are making surprising discoveries. Some of them, it has to be said, not always welcome or necessarily expected. So, I mean, I think the really good news is that for a relative as close as a grandfather, there really are very good chances of being able to solve this, I feel. And in fact, I've recently solved a very similar case for a client who had never known who his grandfather was and had taken DNA tests and was wondering how to interpret them. So, as Sam alludes to here, the key really is in the connections or the lack of them between our shared matches, and this is a bit difficult to describe. So I think it would help if I put up a few slides from a presentation that I've developed about DNA, and I'll share those with you. So anyone who has tested at Ancestry should be familiar with this screen, which is the list of shared matches, and it's one of the main sections of the DNA profile. And what the Ancestry algorithm is doing here is looking at individual segments of DNA and analysing how closely they match those from other users, and these are the numbers here that are given in centimorgans, which is just a way of measuring DNA. So stepping back a bit, the way that DNA, go back to the next slide, the way that DNA works, we all inherit our DNA from our different ancestral lines and particular ancestors, and in theory it's even possible to say which bits come from which ancestors, and this information is all encoded in our chromosomes, which are the structures that carry the DNA. So what we can do is start looking at our matches, and in other words, look at the people in our shared match list and analyse who they are linked to. This is called clustering, and or the Dana-Leeds method, after an American genealogist who has publicised this. And so basically, if you set up a spreadsheet with 4 columns that correspond to the the 4 great grandparents lines, and then you can start to work through each of your shared matches.
Because I've done something similar myself, but using the Ancestry lets you create groups within the actual their website once you log in, and
that's right, yes.
And as you're saying, and this is very similar, but the idea that Sam should take, he'll probably find there's people in his matches that he knows for sure are from his grandmother's line, and that's when you can start. You know, when you have known people in your matches, you can start grouping them and seeing who you share those matches with, and I think he'll find that helpful. And what would you recommend? So he's got in touch with this second cousin. He's obviously mentioned that he has shown some surnames and they haven't recognised any. What should he do next?
Then it's a matter of the using good old documentary research to look into the tree to identify potential candidates. So, so in my case, the shared match was in America, and it was a family that was mainly of Scandinavian descent, and they actually had very few British people in their tree. And then, so when I looked into it, I say there was quite a small pool of people to work from. And then when you narrowed it down to someone who was contemporaneous with the grandmother, it came down basically just to one person, and they happened to be in the same Midlands location at the time, and also the timing and the social circumstances also worked out. I mean, basically, he was a sort of middle to upper class person, and she was a charwoman, and you can so you could sort of imagine how. Or how the relationship might have run there.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. That's been really helpful. I hope that Sam, takes something from that and has a go. It's not that don't give up, Sam. There's hope there. You may well recover who your grandfather was. So if you can pinpoint that this second cousin is from that line, and find who in his family tree was in that Leicestershire area at the right time. So, but thank you very much for coming on and
okay. And good luck to everybody in your research during lockdown.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye bye.